You're clean, aren't you? Except for your tower. You're a tower junkie, Roland.
Hello and welcome to Tower Junkies, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. Tower Junkies is a podcast celebrating the work of Stephen King with an occasional focus on his magnum opus, the Dark Tower series. We discuss the themes, characters, and mythology of the series in Palaver episodes, and review the books and comic series in Kef episodes, probably, eventually. We also discuss non-Tower King novels, TV and film adaptations of King's work, and the latest news about all things that serve the King. You can find more of our work at TowerJunkiesPod.com. Follow us on Twitter at TowerJunkiesPod, and on every other level of social media at TowerJunkiesPod. And for if you'd like to support what we do here, you can become a patron at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. And if you guys will indulge me for just a moment, I do have a little brief ad read of something that I want to do to promote the Patreon thing, because it becomes long-winded when I have a lot of stuff that I want to talk about. So I'm just going to do this stupid bit.
No.
For it. Yes.
Not you.
Oh, yes. So here we go. Okay. Patreon ad read here. Are you in the market for more content from the Obsessive Viewer and our related podcasts, Anthology, and Tower Junkies? You're in luck. Due to a government stimulus check and an overbearing fear of the outside world thanks to a global pandemic, Obsessive Viewer Podcasts is overstocked with Patreon content. Come on down to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer and take advantage of our deals on hundreds of extra content. We've got over 130 B-roll episodes at only $1 per month, TV reviews at $2 per month, full-length movie commentary tracks at $5 per month, and early access to full episodes plus unreleased and exclusive content at $10 per month. At these prices, we're practically giving this stuff away. So just head on down to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer to sign up. Again, that website is patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Sign up today and tell them Pizza sent you.
Can I make a suggestion?
Cute.
Please do.
I don't think you need to pump the brakes on that at all. I don't think you need. That was awesome.
Nice.
Like
Thank
the
you.
little like, please forgive me as I do this. I think you should have, like, you don't need that next time you do that bit, because that's really hilarious. And if you read it straight, it will slay.
Nice. Well,
That's hilarious. That's very good, Matt. That's really hilarious.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So check out patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. And I'm one of your hosts, Matt Hurt, and with me today, as usual, is Tiny. And we have a guest today, Mike White of Obsessive Viewer fame, As Good as It Gets band fame, and
Yes.
And a bunch of other fame.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
How are you guys doing?
Not
Mike,
a
how's it going?
co-host. I am a guest on your show.
Does this feel weird?
It does. I think we talked about this last time I was here.
Yes.
I think my my expertise isn't as honed in respect to just specifically Stephen King, especially because I would imagine there are listeners who come from the Stephen King fandom who stumble upon this podcast or listen to this podcast regularly who don't know me from Obsessive Viewer, like they're more just into Stephen King. So I definitely feel like Stephen King isn't my area of expertise. I'm coming on as the lay. I'm a casual. I'm a Stephen King casual.
A filthy casual.
Yeah. I ask you for your patience and forgiveness.
Well, we're glad to have you back on the episode or on the podcast. And
it's funny. This is a Matt Hurt random thought right now.
God.
But so Matt is he will, when he's talking about, I don't know how to qualify this, but he will often say like, oh, so I was talking to so-and-so of this and this. And so what he just did is, we're talking to Mike White of Obsessive Viewer fame. Well, way before I ever met you, Mike, Matt and I started working together. This was like 2008 or 7.
Yeah.
And he would talk about you, and I had never met you.
Yes. Okay, yeah.
He would all the time say, because he had sent me your music and I had listened to your music, he would also often say, when he started talking about you or telling me a story about you, he would say, so I was talking to Mike White of Thank You, Jade and Gentlemen and Scholars. Of your so over the years,
without fail, every single time.
Awesome.
Like I forgot who you were.
Yeah.
And, like, because most people would say Mike White, my college roommate.
Right.
Yeah, my friend. Yeah,
my friend
right.
Mike had a reference all the time.
But I did. That's how I to this day. When he just said that a few minutes ago, he was like Mike White of, and I was thinking, Thank You, Jade and Gentlemen and Scholars. Even though
I eventually did shorten it to just Mike White of TYJ.
Of TYJ, yeah. That's
so was that like a bit? Was that like an in joke that you would do, or do you try to find a way to like?
It was just a reflex, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of it was due to like being a bit like just okay. I know that it's kind of silly to like explain who a person is in conversation.
Yeah.
But over the years, it's evolved. Your of has evolved,
right?
Because he shortened it to TYJ,
multi-hyphenate of Boonville High School.
Yes, of Boonville High School.
You know, Oscar and Howie's dad.
Yep.
Sorry, I don't think I've ever shared that on the podcast.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
That's funny. That's funny.
So Mike, welcome back to the show. You were on a few years ago for our 11/22/63 novel and miniseries review. Mm-hmm. Which I was delighted to have you on for that one because that is it still considered in your brain as your favorite novel?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know that I've read anything since that's challenged it.
Nice.
Nice.
Also, I don't know. I can't as quickly like re-rank my favorite books as kind of easily as I can do my favorite album or my favorite movie or whatever, because you can't really do a bunch in a sitting or a week or a month or whatever. You really have to dedicate. But yeah, I mean, it moved me like no other books have, for sure.
Nice.
Nice.
And so if you want to I'm going to give you a platform to tell us about As Good as It Gets and everything. This episode is airing June 11th. So if you want to talk about what you've got going on.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. So June 11th, which means there's one more week to back my Kickstarter campaign. So like Matt said, if you're not familiar with me, I'm in a band called As Good as It Gets. We do we're a cross between late 90s radio rock meets early 2000s pop punk like Green Day or Blink-182. And we released an album on Kickstarter. The Kickstarter is to fund a physical CD copy of that album. We kind of wanted to harken back to those early days of printing CDs and listening to music on CDs. So they're songs that we wrote in our old band when we were teenagers, and we re-recorded them in the last year or two, and we're releasing them. As of today, it is actually already funded, so it is going to happen. But if you would like to help us continue to grow and back the project and receive it, there are multiple options. You can, if you just want to support, there's the digital option, or you can get the base CD for $10, or there's for $20, you get the deluxe version of the CD. And I would appreciate it a lot. Kickstarter.com/asgoodasitgets. You go to asgoodasitgetsmusic.com, search for me and Twitter. But the album is called The Spirit of the Staircase. And if you like pop punk music from the early 2000s, can I promise? I think I can promise you'll like this.
I would say that yes, you can promise that. Yeah.
It's pretty much exactly that. If you liked Drive Through Records, Green Day, Blink-182 in the early 2000s, you will like this music. So, it's on Kickstarter. Thank you so much for letting me talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's one more week to back. As of the release of this episode, it ends on June 18th. Nice. So, seek it out.
Sweet. Yeah, and I'm just to on record, I am a backer of this project.
Me too.
Yes. Yeah, Tiny is as well. Thank you guys so much.
Totes. Question, do you guys still own an actual CD player, not like a PlayStation or like a laptop that'll play it, but like a CD player?
I don't.
I don't.
I don't either.
No.
Oh
I
man,
don't either.
that's sad. It's kind of sad, isn't it?
A little bit.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Thinking back to the big boombox days, or the Discmans were such a big deal. Anyway.
I was thinking about the.
I think there's a boombox in our house somewhere.
Okay.
Come to think of it,
Okay.
like a top loading CD. But
Right.
I don't have a Discman or anything like that.
Okay. Yeah, I have nothing.
Yeah, I think Mike, in your Kickstarter intro video thing, I think you referenced like get out your Discman and get ready for it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I know
good.
that's a bit disingenuous considering I don't have one. I mean,
that's the reason
we're not-
why we brought you here. Is we are
Yeah,
it's a gotcha
call me out.
podcast.
Yeah.
That was not my intention with that question.
No, I don't think that we're being cheeky on the Kickstarter. Like we're not. I mean, it's pretty genuine. We're not. There's no wink involved or anything.
Yeah.
But we're definitely trying to evoke an era. I mean, the songs were written between 2002 and like 2008 ish is kind of how those songs were written. So we wanted to kind of evoke that feeling. And I know, I mean, nobody's gonna like carry this around in their car on CD. Like nobody's gonna do the Discman thing. It's gonna be a collector's thing. You'll read it once, and you're really what it is. And I'm fully aware of this is an investment in the band and in the music. So I'm super appreciative to all the people who have invested. We had there was an option to a song shop where Dustin and I would write a song with you, specifically tailored to you, and it's sold out.
Nice.
Nice.
That
That's
option
awesome.
is gone, and Matt is one of those.
Yes.
One of those backers.
And
That's awesome.
by the way, Tiny, I am going to use this as a way to for us to hopefully, if Mike and Dustin are into it, create a new opening theme music for Obsessive Viewer podcast.
Sweet.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah,
of course.
Yeah, and I started making some notes and everything, but I'm not gonna be. I'm not
That's
gonna
awesome.
be. Yeah.
That's perfect.
I on record or not off record if I'm still editing this part out, but
Sure.
I've got to say, first of all, a few things. So prepare for accolades. One, the reason why I don't know if you noticed this or if you got the email at the time that I did it, but I backed it as soon as I got the email saying that it launched because I knew that tier had a finite amount of backing numbers and everything, and I wanted to make sure that I got it because I was very confident that you guys were going to be. It was going to be a success anyway.
Well. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. And also, on that note, I am super proud of you and super happy for you, and never once doubted that you guys would not just fucking meet the goal by the end of the day. So
thanks, man.
Yeah.
Well, that feels wonderful. Thank you. I mean, those are super kind things. It's awesome. I mean, you know me and you know how we are. I was racked with anxiety about it. Really, it was on my mind for a year to varying degrees of like excitement and high stress. And like 2 days before, I'm texting Dustin. I'm like, hey, we can cancel this thing if you want. Nobody would know.
Wow.
And just nervous. And, I was under no like crazy illusion that it was going to be, we were going to sell 100 copies and like people were going to come out of the wood. I'm not crazy. I knew that if it was going to be funded, it would be mostly like generous friends and family. And then, a few fans of the music there. But the immediacy of the response and like the fact that it was funded in like 20 hours and that the first to go was the song shop. I mean, it blew. I like all the emotion.
Nice.
I mean, it was so awesome.
That's awesome.
I mean, you said that you would, and then you did immediately. So I felt that like immediate ping of like feeling grateful and excited. And then like someone I didn't know bought one. I was like, oh, that's awesome.
Nice.
And another person. And then, friends and this person. And like they were gone immediately.
That's
like
awesome.
Part of me, the greedy part of me, like wants to add 2 more just to see if we can. But I, that's 2 more songs we have to write. We're also working on our next like new release of original music. I just didn't want to make like too much work for myself, but
yeah,
I definitely saw dollar signs and
nice.
started dreaming.
That's super awesome.
Nothing wrong with dreams, man. Gotta have them.
Oh no.
I know. Yeah.
And yeah, but my the idea that I have for in terms of the theme music and everything is that I would. I mean, I don't know. I know that the Kickstarter said like, oh, delivery date is like October, but I don't know what the time frame is. But like, I was thinking like we could introduce it with the year in review episode.
Oh, cool. Yeah, for sure.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Sweet.
I mean, it'll be done by then for sure. We'll want to have these done by.
We'll wait until I give you all of my revisions and my notes and everything, because you don't know stress until you have worked with someone who doesn't know the thing that they're pitching and everything.
I'm vaguely aware. Actually, I'm acutely aware. But yeah,
nice.
That's funny. Listen, you can cut all of this, by the way. I kind of tried to like make my pitch short because I know on OV it was really long. So feel free to cut any of this that you don't want.
Okay. But, well, I'll figure it out.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to talk about this. So
nice.
Thank you. Yeah, man. It's up to 747 now.
God, that's so awesome.
And they say like the first 48 hours and the last 48 hours are the big ones. And we were funded in 20 hours.
God, that's awesome.
And I'm still like, I'm going to buy one more ad on my personal Facebook, which I think, funny enough, has more eyes than the As Good As It Gets one. So we'll see what that does. I just posted something today on the Thank You Jade. We're going to do a live stream. I'm going to send out more emails.
Nice.
This more stuff coming. We'll see, man.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to take a picture.
All right, shall we talk about this damn book?
Yes.
We have kept Tiny waiting.
Yes.
For so long.
All right, so today on the podcast, we are going to be talking about On Writing, a Memoir of the Craft, released in 2000 from Scribner. It's Stephen King's memoir of the craft of writing. According to StephenKing.com, On Writing is both a textbook for writers and a memoir of Stephen's life, and will thus appeal even to those who are not aspiring writers. If you've always wondered what led Steve to become a writer and how he came to be the success he is today, this will answer those questions. And we all listened to this on Audible, which is, I don't know if you guys listened to it, but it includes Owen King talking about recording audiobooks for his father as a kid, and then also a live kind of Q&A thing with Stephen King and Joe Hill when the Institute was coming out.
Yeah.
So those are at the end of the audiobook. But before we get into all of that, we have some business to attend to. First, I want to just point out that, as I've been trying to do with each episode that we release or record, let's enter the podcast Ka-Tet corner. Which I did not prompt Mike for, so I don't know what he is feeling right now. But anyway, Podcast Ka-Tet Corner is where I highlight a specific Stephen King podcast each episode, just to kind of share the love and to show appreciation for other people on the path of the beam, such as the one that we are, in being a Stephen King podcast. It started as a Dark Tower podcast, and then we don't talk about the Dark Tower. So this week on the podcast Ka-Tet Corner is Chat Cemetery, a Stephen King podcast. Join host Deanna Chapman as she navigates the eerie world of Stephen King with a wide panel of guests. She's going chronologically through Stephen King's work and adaptations, and it's a treat. It's a really good podcast. Check it out, Chat Cemetery. I'll put a link in the show notes and everything.
On that, I listened to an episode of the Year of Underrated Stephen King.
Ah, yes.
With Kim C.
Mm-hmm.
And you were right. She is incredibly gifted.
Yes.
She's really, really thorough, and her analysis is just next level. She's really good.
What episode did you listen to?
The Dr. Sleep one.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I was very excited because she just released her episode on the Drawing of the Three, and like when she released her episode on the Gunslinger, because she has not read any Dark Tower books, so she is going in blind, and when she released the Gunslinger one, it was like, oh, this is like a 2.5 hour episode. And I'm like, oh, fuck yes, this is awesome. I'm going to like dig into this. And then when I saw the Drawing of the Three one, it was like 2 hours, and I'm like, oh, fuck yeah.
Nice.
So that's a great podcast, and check that out too.
Cool.
Yeah. Mike, have you listened to any Stephen King podcasts aside from Tower Junkies, which I know that you are an avid listener to?
Yeah. No, I haven't. All respect to them. I'm sure they're great. I try to pare back my. Here, I'll give the cheesy answer. I don't listen to a whole lot of podcasts because I'm listening to Stephen King audiobooks.
Nice.
Sweet.
Nice. I was going to call you out on that because one of my next segments was, where are you at with Stephen King? Like, what have you read since 11/22/63?
Jeez Louise, man.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. But yeah, what have you read since?
Are you posing the question? Is that the question?
Yeah, sure. While I bring up the news and everything. Yeah. What have you read since? Because you were on 11/22/63 a few years ago, and what have you read since then?
Yeah. So in the last couple of years, I've read The Bazaar of Bad Dreams, which I found to be, with really any short story collection, hit or miss. Nothing that really stuck with me. And if I'm being completely honest with you, like as I sit here, nothing comes to mind as standout. I don't know. It's weird. As we know, Stephen King is not, I don't want to say plot isn't his strength. He's a plot master, but character obviously is what he's about, and so I don't feel like the short story format is really what he excels at. So I just found them. What's that?
I've just thought that was interesting. Huh?
Yeah. But the other one I read was Mr. Mercedes, which was interesting. I know that's kind of like his curveball, more detective novel than horror. It's not horror at all. It's a detective novel.
Right.
And I'm not a big like detective novel reader. Nothing against it. I just don't really seek them out. I kind of expected or hoped it would be a little scarier. Like if I do read anything detective, The Whisper Man, The Chalk Man, basically anything that ends in man, I guess, are other novels. Those are detective, but those are horror. And so I kind of thought, hey, cool, Stephen King detective novel. It's going to be terrifying. And it's not, but it's good. It's tight. It's a good thriller.
Nice.
I have not read the other two in that series, but they're on the list.
Nice.
Cool. And then other than that, nothing else.
Cool.
Sweet. So hang on, I record our on writing. I'm tweeting a picture of Tiny and pizza. Okay. Stephen King check-ins. I'll do that now. Stephen King check-ins. Mike, what we do is we do Stephen King check-ins and Stephen King news. And so let's start with news because I really only have one that I'm actually excited to talk about. Just really briefly. No, we don't have to do that one. Okay. So Stephen King news all over the place. Blumhouse Productions is, remaking, Firestarter, based on the novel by Stephen King, with, Zac Efron in the role as the father. I can't remember his name. And Michael Grey Eyes is going to be in it. Interesting. He is in the show Rutherford Falls on Peacock. He did a really good job on that. So anyway, It is being adapted by Scott Teems, who worked on Halloween Kills and Rectify. And it just started production, I think, today. How are you guys feeling about Firestarter? Have either of you read Firestarter or have any affiliation with it?
No.
Have you guys started any fires?
Not a big pyro.
Mm.
No, I haven't read it. I do follow Zac Efron, so I see that they are starting. They're doing. He did like the production monitor, like a picture or a Instagram story of the director's monitor, showing a big fire stunt.
Mm-hmm. Looked really cool.
Looks interesting.
Yeah,
nice.
I'm excited for it.
I haven't read it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I read it, I think, a couple of years ago, and then it was pretty good. It was solid. For the Stranger Things fans out there, very, very heavily influenced from Firestarter.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, as is. It's funny. The further away, I really like Stranger Things. But the more I entrench myself in Stephen King, the more I'm just really, really just picking apart the unabashed influence of Stephen King on Stranger Things. So much so that it's basically a Stephen King show.
Right.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
So that's really the only news I have. We do also do check-ins. Mike, do you have any Stephen King check-ins for the show?
Not really. I do follow him on Twitter, and we were kind of talking about this before the show. I read a lot of non-Stephen King horror. And so one of my favorite little back and forths is Paul Tremblay, who is just was like this very mildly popular writer for a while. And then Stephen King recommended his Head Full of Ghosts. And that kind of put Paul Tremblay on the map. So I follow both of them on Twitter and kind of watching them go back and forth and recommend books to each other and get excited about certain things or explain certain things is really fun for me. I'm trying to think of something I'm looking forward to specifically that he has recommended.
Well, while you're doing that, Stephen King does in August have a book coming out called Billy Summers. Is that on your radar at all? Have you heard anything about it?
Only loosely that anything he puts out will be, on a list.
Okay. Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like from what I know about Billy Summers is that it is about a hitman. I would be very curious to have you on to review it. Because it sounds from the sound of it sounds like an unconventional Stephen King book, kind of akin to Mr. Mercedes being a detective story. This story is about a hitman who only takes out contracts on bad people. And knowing your interests, like how you like to go out and murder bad people. Right. Also your appreciation of the show Dexter. I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I had not heard about that. Nice. That looks interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I'm also I've let go of. You will not hear me defend Dexter as vehemently as Matt defends Lost.
Well,
that's a bit of an in joke. Tiny and I were kind of teasing Matt before we hit record. Maybe on the Patreon exclusive, actually, if you listen to that.
Yeah, maybe.
We give Matt a hard time about his love for the things he loves.
Yeah. But I mean, the difference there is that Lost is actually good. Anyway, so
how many Emmys did Lost win?
I don't know. I feel like I don't know. In my heart, it won all of them. So, speaking of which, very brief tangent. Are you going to watch the Dexter revival?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm excited because Clyde Phillips, I think that's his name. Anyway, the original showrunner from the first 4 seasons before it kind of went off the rails is back.
Nice. Lost won 4 Emmys. Best Supporting Actor, Michael Emerson in 2009. Best Supporting Actor, Terry O'Quinn in 2007. Outstanding Drama Series, 2005. And
it won Outstanding Drama. Wow.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And Directing for a Drama Series, 2005. It was also nominated for 4, 8, 12, 16, 20.
Okay, well, Dexter won 1.
So to answer your question,
yeah,
not that awards are
mean anything at all.
Mean anything, except for in this case, they mean everything. So anyway,
just let the record show that any rivalry between Dexter and Lost is in Matt's head.
Yeah, it's completely, it's completely superfluous. Okay, so we should probably get into actually talking about Stephen King, though.
Yeah, how about On Writing?
Yeah, so On Writing, like I said, it was published in 2000 from Scribner, and this book is, for me, and we'll go around and get everyone's read on where they are at in terms of their history with the book, if they have any, but for me, this was one of those... I want to say, I can't say for certain, but I really think that this might have been the first Stephen King book I ever read.
What?
Yeah. It was either before or after I read The Shining.
So many questions.
I know. Well, so this is the reason why. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a writer like no other. I was obsessed with writing stories and reading Goosebumps in particular, and then I graduated to Stephen King. And then I was just very obsessed with that. Like, I really wanted to be a writer. And so now I'm a podcaster, so that's fun.
Sure.
Anyway, and so I also had this quirk, infuriating quality to myself that I would collect things instead of consuming them, or I would collect them with the intention of consuming them. And then ultimately just dilly-dally and not do it. So I would collect books, movies, and everything. I would have movies on my shelf for over a decade that I'd never watched and probably would never ever watch, just because. And so I would collect Stephen King books. I was really just I would go to the bookstore and just browse Stephen King books and buy a paperback or something. So I had On Writing and I read it. And I loved it the first time I read it, and I haven't read it since. So it's been a couple of decades. So it was around the time, probably around the time it came out. So do you guys have a history with On Writing?
I have no history at all.
Go
with
ahead,
it.
Tiny.
Yeah, I knew it existed, and that's about it. I guess I had when it came out, and up until I'd say within the past handful of years, I didn't really have a desire to learn the lessons of this book. I guess I have a history with writing that's the opposite of Matt. I've never had any desire to be a writer. That's never. I thought it always seemed way too tedious, and it never was anything that interested me. So I think for that reason, I just never really read this and never gravitated towards it. So yeah, I don't really have a history with it.
You never wanted to be a writer because it was too tedious, so instead you just became a podcaster with me, which is not tedious at all. Mike, your history.
Yeah, man, I gotta say, I find that fascinating that was one of the first, if not the first, you ever read.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me, I guess, that your interest in writing. How do I put this? Because, of course, this is true. Your interest in writing precedes your interest in Stephen King, timeline-wise.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. I mean, of course, we all, well, not all of us, but writers write when they're kids. That makes sense. But, the fact that you then were aware of Stephen King, and your instinct was not to, read The Shining or Pet Sematary, or Carrie or whatever.
Right.
But you went to like, what can I read that has to do with my first interest? There's something there that's super interesting to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that it was
like
just
why would you have even cared about Stephen King's opinion at that point if you hadn't read?
That's a really good question, and I'm moving my arm to kind of point to. That's a very good question, so you can see it. But anyway, yeah, that's a good question. And I think it's because at the time, and thankfully still now, he is still incredibly ubiquitous in pop culture. And even at the time, like I hadn't read any of his stuff, but I had seen The Shining, and I had seen a couple other Stephen King properties, I'm sure, the miniseries and everything. So like I had at least an understanding of what he does, like in terms of the adaptations and everything. I am just a notorious procrastinator and just hadn't read any of his books at the time. But yeah, I was definitely very much aware, and like I knew that, Stephen King is an institution. He's Stephen King. Like
he's an icon.
He's an icon.
Been an icon for decades.
Yeah. Like his opinion obviously is something that I would want to seek out and take to heart. And yeah, and now I don't write or anything, but I write reviews on the website sometimes. But yeah, I don't write fiction. Yeah.
So, I don't have a history, to use your words, with on writing. I have a bit of a history with Stephen King, but this was only, I mean, I read a lot of biographies. I also like books about the craft. I read kind of a lot of those. I mean, I joke sometimes that like my favorite genre is like Saturday Night Live nonfiction. That's like my favorite genre of book, is like anything where they talk about like the craft of SNL or really the craft of comedy or anything like that. So, like I haven't read any like how to write books. Like I wouldn't just read a book on the craft by a nobody. But I'm definitely interested in like an established name's perspective on the thing. So like, you know, when I started to get into Stephen King not that long ago, and really kind of like keep track of my book reading lists and stuff. I think it was around the time when I got Audible and I realized that he had a not just a memoir, but a book on the craft of writing. And then it was kind of one and the same. I added it to my list. So very recent awareness of this book.
Nice. Yeah, and since you're so interested in that, I am currently working on podcasting a memoir of the craft. So expect that in early 2022.
Yeah. I really want to read Fairuza Balk's biography, The Craft, a memoir of the craft.
Nice.
Forward by Nev Campbell.
Nice. That's so weird. I was just thinking of Fairuza Balk today, or like a couple of days ago. Yeah, that's interesting.
Not every day, but when it happens,
yeah,
it's a deep well.
Right. Okay, so we've all read the book, and just kind of, what did you guys expect going into it, and how did you guys feel about his approach to it? It's a very short book, and it has, I don't want to say it's too anecdotal, but I kind of felt like my memory of it, I mean, I hadn't read it in probably almost 20 years. So like my memory of it and what I was excited about rediscovering with it was all of the, like, I was hoping that it would be have more anecdotes about his like specific writing of, like, I had vaguely remembered there being stuff about The Stand and The Dark Tower that at the time obviously went over my head. But what I've kind of found interesting was that this was a very brisk, very short book that, like, those points weren't as pronounced in it as my memory was. So anyway, how did you guys feel about it and the structure of it and everything?
I didn't know what to expect going in. I was curious how much biography there was going to be in there, and I think there was an appropriate amount because it didn't weigh down the whole book, the whole read. And I appreciated that stuff because I didn't know a lot of it. I found, of the biographical stuff, I found his relationship to education and his professional life to be the most interesting, because he doesn't have a college degree, or he has like an honorary one, basically. So he's one of the most successful writers of all time and has limited education. And then the fact that he spent years as like a blue collar professional, like, he did laundry for years as professionally. That's what he did for money for years. And I think that experience comes through in his writing a lot. A lot of his characters will be blue collar, charmingly blue collar and authentically blue collar. And I think that's right what you know, right? And he knows that life. So that was interesting to read about. But I was curious if he was going to get into a lot of the nuts and bolts stuff. He has a few parts of it where he talks about like, oh, this is why I don't like adverbs, and this is how you should structure sentences and stuff like that. And I'm not overly interested in that stuff because I'm not a writer, and I don't think I could ever be one. And that's not in my wheelhouse. And so it's not that I wasn't interested in it. It's just that I feel like that's not for me. And so I wasn't overly interested in it. But what I loved, my favorite parts are when he's telling the anecdotes of how he came to his stories and how he crafted his stories. I think one of the most interesting is Carrie, where he talked about how he almost threw it in the trash. He did throw it in the trash, and his wife Tabitha picked it up and read it and was like, "This is good. You need to keep going with this." And he was hitting a wall because he doesn't know what it's like to be a teenage girl. And so his wife helped him. She was like, "Well, I'll help you with that, dumbass." And thankfully, that got us the book Carrie, which ironically I've never read, but I feel like I've read it before because of stories, and I've seen the remake movie. I've never seen the original movie either. So anyways, those anecdotes and those little notes about how he found the story and how he found characters and how he got ideas, that's the real gritty, fun, meaty stuff that I was interested in. And there's plenty of nuggets of that in the story, and that's the stuff that I really loved.
Nice. Yeah, I really like those portions of it too. Mike, how'd you find On Writing?
Yeah, Tiny, I agree with you that stuff I think was the most interesting, and I actually expected there to be more of it. I don't know if you guys got the sense, or maybe it's obvious, I don't know, but like the book is really divided in half. There's, I'll say it's divided into 3 parts. The first part is biographical. The middle part is a book about the craft of writing, and then the last short portion is like where he is now, coming up with this book and the accident that he was in.
Yeah.
I don't know if I hoped for or what I hoped for, but I expected more of a blend of like, this happened in my life, and then that's how I came upon this story, got the idea for this story, or what he was going through as he conceived a lot of stories. I think that there's a parenthetical or a subtext that he touches on briefly, that like a lot of his most successful stuff, like he doesn't remember well because he was just on coke the whole time. He doesn't spend a lot of time talking about that, but from what I know about him, I mean, like that was most of the 80s.
Yeah.
Which unfortunately was like the height of his fame.
Yeah.
Or at least the height of his reach in popular culture.
So far.
But yeah, so far. Yeah. I mean, I guess the height, geez Louise, was 2017 or whatever. With the remake, and then Mike Flanagan, or not the It remake,
right?
The It modern adaptation,
right? All of that being kind of propagated and everything by the Dark Tower movie.
Yeah. See the Patreon episode we recorded to understand how sarcastic he's being. So I mean, I liked it all. I find the biographical stuff super fascinating, and I really enjoyed that quite a bit. I also, in contrast to Tiny, I love the stuff about adverbs. I don't know about you guys. Did you guys all listen to the audiobook?
Yes.
Yeah, so did I. I found a lot of the instances where he would like read a paragraph to talk about like the feel and flow of a paragraph. That was a little hard to follow. You couldn't get that without looking at it with your eyes.
Right.
Where he would like literally have to say, and here there's a paragraph break, where you would just see it if you were reading it. So I missed out on some of that, but I do love the nitty gritty and the nitpicks and the stuff about craft that he mentions. I expected more of a blend.
Yeah, there's this humble nature to him. One of the reasons why I think that he resonates in our culture, and for me personally, is like his story, like the story of Stephen King and the things that he does, his strengths as a writer and the things that he hones in on as a writer speak to me on such a deep level, because he's a man who he grew up very much kind of below the poverty line. He grew up in like talking about his first, when he got Carrie published, I mean, that catapulted him, because the advance he got from that was life-changing for him and his family.
Yeah.
And just like, I think that kind of history for him is something that really is communicated well in his writing in terms of characterization, because he's not to say that like, oh, if he came from money or if he didn't want for things or anything, he wouldn't be able to write convincing characters or anything, but he has such a penchant for writing characters of a certain type that are just like ordinary, everyday Americans who struggle and everything the same way that he does. But he doesn't make that like the focal point of the narrative. It's just a thing that is the characters, I don't know, traits and everything. I don't know. It's just something I've always admired about him, and I love the context of it, given his history in the biography section, even as admittedly as kind of brief and not as in-depth as I would have liked it to be, as it was, it still provided a lot of interesting context for the writing that I love so much and I have loved for decades. 2 decades.
Yeah. Any particular bit that stuck out as poignant or evocative, particularly for you?
Definitely in terms of the way that he writes about how just writing, like him writing and selling his writing to put food on the table is something that just really just struck a nerve with me and made me really appreciate his work even on a deeper level. And also just him talking about writing as a kid and the positive feedback he got from like his mother when he wrote like his first story and stuff.
Yeah, man, he really has his support net is really strong.
Yeah.
I don't want to throw my parents under the bus. I had a extremely privileged life. We were not wealthy, but like we always had food. We always had clothes. Yeah. But my mom was not and neither was my dad. My parents were not like, they didn't buy into creativity. Right? They were, I mean, my dad's a mess. I've mentioned that on podcasts before. My mom is a very like business-minded, She is a boomer, if not just a little bit younger than a boomer.
Mm-hmm.
And she's progressive politically, but in terms of like that old school, like work hard, work ethic values, she definitely comes from that. And so, I didn't have a whole lot of like support as a creative kid, like for writing. She was always like, just make sure you have a backup plan. Whereas I feel like, Stephen King's parents and his wife are like, yeah, do this. Because why not? And I didn't really get that from my parents. I think, I don't know why I'm going on a rant about my parents in this episode, but I just like, I think we have his parents and his wife to thank that we have Stephen King. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Totally. And it's his mother, because something I found really interesting is that his father left when he was a kid.
Yeah, his mother.
But yeah, that and it's funny because like I'll drop some truth bombs too. Growing up, we were kind of constantly and consistently scraping by, and like in terms of my creativity, like I wanted to be a writer. Like I have memories of. Like I've talked about this on podcasts before, but I wrote to Saban Entertainment because I was a huge fan of Power Rangers and was like, why don't you make a show that's like this? And I outlined like an idea for a TV show. It was basically Power Rangers, but set in Ohio where I lived. And I have memories of like having a dream, like taking a nap in the day, having a dream where I was running around with a friend in the playground and building of my school. And then I immediately like woke up and wrote like this little short story about a school that's taking kids and like doing experiments on them and stuff. And like I have memories of these. I also like to credit that I had a story that was titled Armageddon before the movie came out. Because I had just learned the movie Armageddon, or I just learned the word Armageddon, and I was like, oh yeah, right. This is a good word. I'm gonna write a story around it. And I don't think I ever did. But yeah, and I came up with a good mnemonic device for remembering how to spell it. It's spelled out as Arm-Aged Dawn. Anyway, so I have these memories of like these creative like writing exercises that I did and these like little writing things that I did. I have talked about this before also, but I wrote a short story for the Goosebumps some contest they had for the Goosebumps Series 2000 that I actually won like second or third place. I think it was like technically third place, but I think it was like a grand prize, first prize, and second prize. So I think I got second prize.
Gotcha.
So like I got a signed copy of R.L. Stine's autobiography, and like it's lost to time now, but I don't know where it is. But yeah, like in terms of creative, like support for creativity, like growing up, like I don't think my dad really cared much about it. Not to speak ill of the dead, but he was just kind of like it wasn't his thing. Like he liked watching TV and movies and stuff, and that's what we kind of bonded over and everything. But in terms of like writing and stuff, he didn't really like. I don't think he was really taking an interest in that. But my mom was like constantly like supportive about it, but more in a like, oh, this is like blanket, like, oh, this is good, like I'm so proud of you and everything, which is great. But it's just like, it was like not like a hands-on kind of thing, which is fine, but I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, now you guys talk.
Well, yeah, it's funny to speak to both of your points. I'll drop some bombs too.
Ooh,
no,
nice.
Not really, but like, so my experience was sort of different from Mike's, whereas my dad is actually a very gifted artist, and my dad,
cool.
When he went to college, he majored in art and wanted to be an artist.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
like there are paintings hanging in my parents' home, and my grandmother's home for their entire lives that my dad painted, and
Wow.
he basically gave it up to.
I did not know that.
Yeah, he basically gave it up to, while he was still in college, to get a more quote unquote practical degree, and he moved on to something else, and he basically had a professional life and basically gave it up. And I was really hoping when he retired he was going to pick it back up, but he still hasn't yet. But anyways,
Wow.
my dad has always been into art and is very much into art. We've been to museums several times, and I think I ran with it when I was a kid. I was in art classes, and there's some drawings and stuff that I did as a kid that were pretty damn good for like a 7-8-year-old.
Nice.
And I think there's no reason for it. I think I just began to grow and like basically gravitated towards sports and just really got away from the art thing. And it's funny because sports don't last for most people. Right? If you become a professional athlete, that's different, but that's such a tiny percentage of people who become professional athletes.
It also sounds exhausting.
Right? Yeah. So by the time most people are in their late teens or early 20s, they're no longer athletes. And so I think it's funny because I had this total jock thing about, I was a total jock in high school, but I always had this appreciation for art in the background. And I think obviously, sports just became a less influential part of my life. And so I really gravitated back towards the art, and it's kind of funny how that happens. I'm not creative that way, but I have it's the biggest hobby that I take part in are artistic ones. So,
Nice.
I think it's funny how you can have a parent who influences you in certain ways, or they maybe have plans for you, or they approach parenting in a certain way, and it can it's really a crapshoot, like Mike didn't have a creative influence from his parents, but he's wildly creative. Of the three of us is the most creative. And I had that influence as a kid, and I'm not creative at all. And not that I'm not creative at all, but I'm not an artist in any way, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I remember, might be a bit of a tangent, Tiny, but I remember in high school, did you take an architecture class?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to be an architect for a while.
I remember that about you. So yeah.
Again, the practicality of it kind of crashed it down for me, because the architecture teacher I had was like, look, if this is your dream, go for it. But I want you to be aware that being an architect is not really that grandiose. Like, it's really like the first 10 years of your career, someone's going to bring you a set of plans and say, hey, draw this. It's not really going to be very romantic. He's like, you probably have an idea of what it is in your head, and it's really not that when you get down to it and start doing it as a form of work. And I was like, well, okay, I guess maybe I'm going to change my plans. And Ball State University here in Indiana has a very prestigious architecture school. And so that was what I was going to do for years. I thought about that, and then gravitated towards teaching, and then got away from that. And anyways, but so I had a creative itch, I guess, throughout my life, but it's never.
That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's never, I was a pretty good drawer and stuff when I was a kid, but I never honed that craft or that skill. I kind of gave up on it, and I don't really have a desire to pick it back up, but, it's interesting how we evolve, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Matt,
go ahead.
Going back to the book itself.
Yes.
What did you think of the layout of it? What did you think of such a distinct bifurcation?
I was really I liked it. I liked when we got past the biography part of it and got more into the craft of it. I like that. I think is, in a certain respect, I think deep down that's kind of what I wanted out of it, was the craft aspect of it, because I'm very interested in process and how that age-old question, how do you get your ideas? But like I'm really interested in the craft of it, so I'm glad that we got that. What I kind of found interesting and surprisingly, I think when I first read it in like 2000 or 2001, what I found really interesting about it was the section about the accident at the end. And like listening to that now and reading that now, like it's all stuff that I already know, obviously. I know enough about the accident and everything about it. But to hear him kind of talk about it is really interesting. And it also just makes me think, like, what? Two things. One, and we don't have to pause it. We don't have to talk about this, or we don't have to. I think is the word postulate. I don't know. Postulate.
Postulate.
Yeah, something. Sure.
Postulate.
We don't have to talk about like the theories behind this or anything, but what I was wondering, like, what would this book have been if he didn't have the accident? Like, what would it look like?
Yeah, I mean, that thread is throughout. He mentions it several times and then completely explains it in the third part of it. Yeah. Not that I'm complaining. I mean, it's important. I just think I could have read two books. I could have read the biography, and then here's a textbook on the craft.
Yeah.
But when you put them together, a memoir on the craft, or on writing a memoir of the craft, I really thought that they would be blended a little better.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
The other thing I kind of thought about was, and this is something I think about a lot, what would his career be like today if he hadn't had the accident? And that is something that I'm fascinated with in any front. Like, when someone who has creative output of any kind, when they have something happen to them or something happen to their career or to their life that changes the trajectory so drastically, I just wonder, like, the what if of it all. Yeah, so I don't know. But yeah, so where were we at with the review?
Shoot, I feel like I had another point about it. So the audio book is read by the author.
Yes.
Which I love and I find so endearing. I love, he's pretty clear and efficient speaker and writer. I mean, he's not verbose. He is efficient, but I love his little idiosyncrasies and almost regional dialectic choices. And I even texted to you, or maybe I put it in the chat, but when he'll add like a "that's all" to the end of a sentence, do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
He's like, I wasn't trying to ruffle any feathers, just trying to say what I had on my mind. That's all.
Right.
I love that. I find that so endearing.
Yeah. I think another part of it that's endearing, to steal your word, is the fact that Matt brought it up too, he's very humble. And I think that comes through on writing, because he doesn't have I don't think he really has like a cardinal rule that he lays out, or a list of cardinal rules. He just says like, hey, I'm not a big fan of adverbs, and here's why. He doesn't say you can't use adverbs or don't use adverbs.
Right.
I'm just not a fan of them, and this is why. Yeah. And then he will say, you don't have, he says, hey, this is how I structure my sentences. And I don't work from a blueprint or a outline. But he never says you shouldn't work from an outline, or you shouldn't do this. He just says, this is how I do it. And I think that's a form of humility, and it's really interesting coming from somebody who is as incredibly successful as he is, and has written both things that are both critically acclaimed as well as fan acclaimed. And
podcaster acclaimed.
Podcaster acclaimed. So that's one thing that jumped out at me that I really loved, and it's part of his charm as a person.
Wholeheartedly agree, and I think that there's something to that in the fact that I'm thinking of a point that I was going to make that I completely lost my train of thought on. I thought I was going to find it at the end of that, but yeah, I just the humbleness is something that's really, really endearing, and because since he doesn't have those hard and fast rules, he doesn't have like any other book, any other kind of. I feel like this is the way to discuss any kind of creative craft, because it's otherwise, if he had these like rules, this checklist, like, oh, you can be as famous as Stephen King if you do this and everything, that's like huckster shit. That's snake oil salesman stuff. And the fact that like really the only like hard and fast rule he has is like if you don't have time to read, you don't have time to write.
Yeah.
And like that has stuck with me for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And normally I don't really have time for either. So yeah. Mike, how did you feel about his rules or lack thereof rules?
Yeah, I think he did a really good job of kind of towing the line between really saying, hey, this is what works for me. Just do what what's going to work for you. But also being realistic about the things that just don't work. He's like, he's pretty generous with his rules and soft with his rules. But he's like, you need to do this 6 days a week or you don't actually want to do it.
Right.
And I kind of loved that. Like, he's not a hard ass about it, but he's realistic.
That is the thing, that kind of blanket statement. The thing I love about Stephen King, the thing that I admire about Stephen King is his work ethic and the fact that this is his 9-to-5 job. He sits down and writes. He goes on his walk. He eats and everything. Like he does these. This is a ritual for him. It's ritualistic. And it's something that is just so, it comes through in his work because he is so, this is his thing. This is what he does. Like, he writes. And the routine of it is amazing. Like, I was just thinking today, because we are, as of this recording, we're on the cusp of Lisey's story, the adaptation. As of this release, though, it premiered last week. But what's fascinating to me is that Lisey's story, granted, it was probably written, the adaptation was probably written in like 2019, and the post-production I think was more in 2020 pandemic era, but just the fact that he wrote all 8 episodes of that adaptation, and that is releasing now into the world. And he also had a short novel release in March for Later, which check out our review of Later. And then later this year, he is having another like full-length novel release in August. Like, the output of this guy is just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
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 It really is. It's superhuman. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Another part that jumped out to me, or I guess I just related to it a lot, or it spoke to me, was again, it wasn't a cardinal rule, but it was a suggestion that he had, that he doesn't ever use a thesaurus. And he doesn't think anyone else should either, because he gives an example. I can't remember what he uses, a word, and then he comes up with like 2 other words that mean the same thing. And he was like, those other 2 words are fine, but like the first word that you come up with is usually the best one.
Yeah. And
it's funny because most of the writing I've ever done in my life has been academic. And I'll say I was good at it because I won pretty much the only accolade from my college career that I'm really proud of is the fact that I never got less than a B on any paper I ever wrote.
God, that's awesome.
That's Ball State, Ivy Tech, and I flunked out of Ball State. So that was a skill. I guess writing academically was a skill I had that I was reasonably good at, just literally based on those grades. And the only strength that I thought I had as a writer was that I have a pretty solid vocabulary. And so I was constantly looking for a better word all the time. I would read through like a paragraph I wrote and I was like, no, that's not it. I can come up, there's a better word for that. And it's funny because he says, don't do that.
Right.
It's really funny because it's like the one thing that I thought I was good at, he says you shouldn't do. So that jumped out to me as something as I related to, and it really spoke to me individually.
Nice.
Well, he does talk about like the toolbox analogy, right?
Yes.
Like, come to it with your toolbox.
And I love that analogy. It is
me too.
It's so plainly spoken, and it fits so well. It's like a classic Stephen King thing. Like, I wouldn't dare say that he invented this metaphor or whatever, but it is very in keeping with his style, that he just has this straightforward metaphor about having tools for his trade. It's really, really remarkable.
Yeah.
Sorry to step on your toes, Mike. Well,
No, that's okay. I'm trying to remember exactly like what the levels of the toolbox were, but just to kind of like encourage you, Tiny, or let you off the hook, I think that might, back in the day, have been one of the tools in your toolbox.
Yeah. Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't so completely dismiss it just because he says don't do that.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I think it's a very gregarious and magnanimous and very, I don't know, precipitous
I have
idea.
a student who writes a new word of the day every day. I have her in class on the back board. And she's one of my favorite students because of it.
Nice.
That's funny.
Nice.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a cool thing.
He also talked about, I don't remember the specifics, but he basically went through an exercise about sentence structure and how to take simple ideas and make them seem more advanced or something like that. And he had this exercise where he wrote a sentence, and then he was like, it's not a very good sentence, and here's how to make it better. And then he made it better, and he was like, so now it's a solid sentence, and it has this, but let's add some fluff. And then he does it again, and he goes through like the third version of the sentence, and it's way better. And it's like, this is so like I want to know the next sentence now.
Right.
And it's just crazy how he has the ability to do that. That's I was marveling at his skill and his artistry in that passage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, small anecdote going back to his output and everything, like the button that I should have put on that stretch where I was talking about his output and everything is like, yeah, he writes every day and everything. And I downloaded Final Draft like 2 weeks ago. Haven't opened it. So, yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, what else can we talk about with this? Should we talk about the accident?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. How'd you guys feel about it? Did you like this change in the plot of his life?
I mean, I think it had to be in there because he had to do it. I think cathartically, or just he had. I feel like he didn't have a choice but to put that in there, and so I think it's a little out of place, or it's very abrupt, and it's such a shift that maybe it's a little goofy for the reader. But I think he had to do it again for his own reasons. So I don't have an issue with it for that. And the gory details were kind of some classic Stephen King, you know. The pain really came across, and all the details. It's funny how he was never very condemning of the man who injured him. I mean, he wasn't friendly to him necessarily, but he wasn't like this dumb son of a bitch, or like really he wasn't particularly angry about it. That's an interesting part of it.
There is an anecdote that I believe the guy who hit him ended up dying down the road. Like he had like a heart attack or something at some point.
Okay.
And I think Stephen King actually bought the van and just took a baseball bat to it and just smashed it up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, that I just thought that was kind of, it's a funny anecdote.
Tiny, I kind of agree with you. I mean, I liked it there, and it was fine, and it was interesting, but it feels, or at least it reads like it's tacked on. Like the craft part ends, and there's like an ending to the book, and then he's like, well, now I guess I got to tell you about the thing.
It's not organic at all.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's well done, but the transition is not organic.
Yeah, it could have been a whole separate book, like you said.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And wow, just to confirm, or just to follow up on this, Chicago Tribune, from September 24th, 1999. So this was June, July, August, September, like 3 months after it. Horror writer Stephen King buys minivan that hit him. Horror writer Stephen King has confirmed that he obtained a macabre souvenir from the accident that left him seriously injured. He bought the minivan that struck him. Quote from King, "Yes, we've got the van, and I'm going to take a sledgehammer and beat it."
That's funny.
Wow.
So yeah, that's interesting. Anyway.
Okay.
So yeah, we can kind of start winding down because I don't know how much more we have to really discuss it. And everything.
I think so.
But,
I mean,
yeah.
We've made our peace.
How my kind of parting question to you guys, and I don't know how much discussion we'll get from this, but did reading on writing, did it affect how you feel about King, or did it change like your perspective on him and his work in any substantial way, or do you foresee it changing? Like when you read your next Stephen King book, are you going to think like, oh, okay, like are you going to have more thought into his process, or is this just like this is a cool memoir form?
I think that's a really interesting question. But my answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I didn't enjoy on writing, and not that I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, I would recommend it to a Stephen King fan, maybe not someone who's not a fan. I enjoyed it, but no, I don't think I'm going to take any of that, because I would have liked more, like I said, like if I'm reading a Stephen King, I think I would be interested now in the biographical information that led up to it. And we just didn't get enough of that. So I don't know, aside from like a little early biography and then, some suggestions, I don't think it colors all that much of his output, and certainly not anything moving forward.
Yeah.
Interesting. Tiny, does it change your perspective on him at all? Positive or negative?
I think it does. Positive, because it's I think because I read him so much, it's definitely gonna be in the back of my mind the next time I read him, or experience one of his books. I'm definitely going to be listening for these things, because I read him exclusively on audiobook. That's pretty much the only way I read anymore. So that's something I'm going to be listening for when I read his books next. Is the little points he makes throughout the book, and I think I think just to mention it, one of the things I latched onto is just how Stephen King doesn't do a lot of interviews. He doesn't speak a lot. I'll put it that way. He might do an interview for he'll give an opinion on something like in written form, or he'll write something quickly. He's on Twitter all the time.
Yeah.
But he doesn't do like radio interviews, or like he doesn't go on like the Tonight Show or stuff
unless
like that.
He's promoting a book.
Right, but even then, not a lot. Like he doesn't personally go out and do a lot of that stuff. And so there's not a lot of audio of him out there, or like there's not a lot of long form stuff of him out there. And I think this was such, because he read this audiobook, and because the book is truly in his voice, it's so exemplary of his personality. And I'm happy to say I really like him as a person.
Yeah.
Like he's way funnier than you would think he would be. He's very charming and charismatic. He's kind of has this kind of down home country attitude, I guess, or just I don't know. I'm not sure how to pinpoint it, but he's just got this really fun personality that it's not that I didn't know he had, it's just I hadn't really experienced it. It's
got like an approachability to him.
Right. Yeah. He's very much an everyman, which so many of his characters are, and so that's kind of a great thing. And I also, just to wrap it up, I'll say I feel like this was sort of inspirational. Like I don't I'm not going to write anything. I don't. But as I was listening to it, I was like, you know what? Maybe I could write a story. Maybe I could. Maybe I could do this. I think maybe I could. But
that's our assignment for next time.
Right. I just don't have a story to tell. So it's not. I'm not sitting here like, man, I have this story that I really want to. That's not something I have. That's not a passion of mine or anything. It's not. It's not a notion I ever have. So it's not something I would pursue. But it was. If I were an aspiring writer, I would have been very inspired by this book.
Yeah,
put it that way. Yeah.
Yep. It doesn't change my kind of perspective on him or anything. It just gives some more context to who he is as a person in terms of his writing, which I already knew most, if not all, of the stuff. So I just thought it was a really fun adventure through his craft. And we neglected to talk about this, and we don't need to harp on it too much, but the candor that he brings to his talk about his substance abuse problems, his alcoholism, and his sobriety. I was surprised with since there wasn't quite a lot of like candid stuff in his early biography stuff. Like I kind of I don't know. I figured that maybe he might wax, not nostalgia per se, but like he would talk maybe more about his father leaving and everything. But but he didn't. But when he's talking about his sobriety and he talks about like the intervention that his friends and family had for him, I was very kind of, I respected the candor that he brought to that portion of it. So I respected that about the book.
Nice.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, well, I think that'll do it for our review of On Writing, a memoir of the craft. Can't wait for the movie adaptation, inevitably. There's not going to be one, guys.
Right.
Anyway, would you guys watch like a biopic of Stephen King?
I'd watch anything or read anything Stephen King, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd watch it for this. I don't know. I don't know that I need it.
Yeah. Yeah, I could take or leave it, but if it ever happens, you can rest assured that the premier Dark Tower podcast that does not talk about the Dark Tower will be covering the inevitable biopic whenever it may come.
Yeah.
Okay, so to kind of wind down, to kind of close out the episode, Mike, what is your next Stephen King book do you think that you're going to read?
I don't know. I don't know yet. I kind of know what I'm going to read throughout the summer. I'm tackling the Beatles Bob Spitz biography, and I have a couple of audiobooks on the docket, none of which are Stephen King. Excuse me. But I think by fall, maybe. I don't want to make any promises. I might tackle The Stand.
Nice.
This might be the year.
Nice.
Yeah.
I gotta say, post-pandemic or in-progress pandemic, whatever you want to call it, now and last year is as good a time as any to read The Stand. I think it'll have some very special resonance for you in light of the collected trauma that we've all suffered.
Of course. Yeah.
I will say, and I don't want to put you on the spot, or I don't want to put any of us on the hook for this, but I have long wanted to do a series of episodes on Creepshow, Creepshow 2, Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, and the new Creepshow TV show. And so, Mike, if you have any interest on that, you can hop on those. I don't know when we're going to do those, but
it's on the list.
Yeah.
It's somewhere.
Yep. Have you watched any of the new Creepshow on Shudder?
No.
Okay. I watched the first season and liked it, and the specials were good. So, yeah. All right, well, that'll do it for this episode of Tower Junkies. We are currently in progress on our Lisi's Story adaptation reviews, and so expect those bi-weekly. But if you are a Patreon supporter, if you pledge $2 per month, you'll get access to my immediate reaction reviews of each episode of Lisi's Story, literally the second that they are posted on Apple TV Plus. So the second that they go live on Apple TV Plus, that's when the embargo lifts. That's when my review posts on Patreon. So pledge $2 per month on Patreon for that stuff. And also if you pledge $5 per month, you get access to that. And then also movie commentary tracks, which I try to hit at least one Stephen King adaptation commentary track per month, and with a total of like 3 commentary tracks per month total. So check that out, and also check out Patreon. And Mike, where can people find you online? Where can people find your Kickstarter? And do you want to give an overview of that once again for the listeners who, for some reason, came in 2 hours into a podcast?
Yeah, shoot, all over the place. Probably the easiest way to find me is on Twitter at I am Mike White. I'm on there quite frequently. I may not post or tweet every day, but I'm on there every day. So hit me up. Slide into those DMs. You can at me, and I will send you where you need to go. If you're not interested in Twitter, As Good As It Gets music.com. As Good As It Gets music.com. And you can find all the stuff. Kickstarter, YouTube, previous albums, Bandcamp, however you listen to music.
Sweet.
As Good As It Gets music.com.
All right, awesome. And look forward to a new, not for Tower Junkies, but a new Obsessive Viewer opening theme music in 2022.
Yeah.
From As Good As It Gets. So I'm super excited for that. And I'm super excited to alienate you with all of my notes and everything. So, all right. Well, Mike, thank you so much for slumming it with us and being a guest on Tower Junkies. It's a different role for you from Obsessive Viewer, so it's nice to have you on this show. So, having said all that, any parting thoughts, guys?
No, it's fun. Thanks for having me.
Yep.
Glad to have you.
All right. Well, in that case, we're going to round us out, and long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.
Okay. And now, here's a short clip from our Patreon exclusive RSS feed. To hear the full clip and more exclusive Patreon content, go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer and become a patron at the minimum rate of $1 per month. Thank you and enjoy. So anyway, what's new with you, Tiny?
Not much, man.
Nice.
Getting into the spring spirit.
Yes, today it was up to the 80s, I think.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
Went home and cut the grass and spread some mulch.
People had their collars popped really high, and they had their Walkmans around their ears, and they were competing against other teens to fund to raise money for the local youth group or the local youth center, because it was the 80s today.
God damn it. I did not know where you were going with that.
I realized as I was talking that there was no way that you were picking up what I was putting down.
Local youth center? What was that?
Center? I don't know.
Tower Junkies is edited and produced by Matt Hurt and presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. For a full archive of our episodes, go to towerjunkiespod.com/archive. You can also like our Facebook page at facebook.com/towerjunkiespod and follow us on Twitter at towerjunkiespod. If you enjoy the show, please take a couple minutes to leave us a rating and a quick review on Apple Podcasts. This is the easiest way to support what we do, and all it costs is just a little bit of your time. If you'd like to donate to the podcast, you can make a PayPal donation at towerjunkiespod.com/donate or support us on Patreon for recurring donations and access to commentary tracks and B-roll audio recorded exclusively for patrons at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Every donation goes toward paying the fees to keep the podcast running and is greatly appreciated. For official Obsessive Viewer merch, including shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more, visit our TeePublic store. You can find a link to the store in the show notes of this episode and at obsessiveviewer.com/donate. Or you can simply search for Obsessive Viewer at teepublic.com. For information about our annual live event showcasing short horror films from local filmmakers, check out shocktoberinirvington.com. And for an archive of all our events, as well as news about potential future events, head over to obsessiveviewer.com/live. For more podcast content, you can find our flagship movie and TV review and discussion show, The Obsessive Viewer Podcast, at obsessiveviewer.com and on Twitter at obsessiveviewer. You can also find Anthology, Matt's solo podcast covering The Twilight Zone, and other classic and contemporary science fiction anthology TV shows at anthologypod.com and OV Anthology Pod on Twitter. And finally, check out The Secular Perspective, Tiny's side project podcast, which tackles current events and life's big questions from the perspective of secular hosts Chad and Amanda at thesecularperspective.com. Music for the podcast is provided with permission from Fingers T on YouTube. Additional bumper music is provided courtesy of As Good As It Gets, which can be found at facebook.com/asgoodasitgetsband. Thank you so much for listening. Long days and pleasant nights.
Kitty!